Okay, gonna try and do it all in one take this time. Let's see how well I do. Okay, let's start. Yeah, dropping things. All right, here we go to the end of the yellow brick road, and we've come to well, not the complete end, just the end of the first leg of our journey. Return of the King, which closes off Wreathe. You'll have to excuse me. I've developed a taste for plain soda water. Listen to those bubbles. Doesn't smell like anything. Like little water bugs jumping off my tongue. I like the tingleness that soda water brings. I started in on the soda water. I was using it. I was drinking like regular sodas, mainly Coke, and sometimes others. And I started cutting them down with soda. Like at first it was just a little bit, and then it got a little bit more. Then it was doing half and half for a while, and then I just was doing mainly soda with just enough cola or what have you to give the whole thing just a tinge of flavor, a hint of flavor. And then I just started drinking soda. And I did end up getting a soda stream and started playing around with their flavors. And it's all right. But I found their cartridges, the quality of the bubbles you get really depends on how full that cartridge is. So once you get about halfway through, then it seems to lose. You don't quite get the same tingleness in your tongue. So, Return of the King. Return of the King always struck me as, whenever I read that title, just one word just keeps hitting me, and that's pretentious. It always strikes me as what is perhaps my most pretentious song title. But I do like the song. The song came from a place a long while ago, as I think I've mentioned when I was talking with Scott a few days ago, about that time when I sat down and focused on making that ball of noise, as I called it, when I really wanted to make like the ultimate metal angry thing, and it was just garbage. It was terrible. It didn't work out. But on that, what I was probably trying to imitate was something like Pantera's, was it Far Beyond Driven? The one that has the drill going through the guy's head. The one with that cover. It has like, I mean, the whole thing is grinding, and then it all ends on this really sweet, almost ambient song, which I think the song was called Planet Caravan. And so I guess when I was making my ball of noise, as I like to call it, just an ear-splitting monster of thing. At the end, I wrote this song, Return of the King, and kind of ended it there. And I think I might have been, that's what I was trying to imitate, I think. And it was probably about the only listenable song on that whole experience. Oh, this isn't going to work. You'll have to pardon me. Ooh, no, don't do that. Don't do that. I'm just doing some computer stuff. You'll have to excuse me. So getting back to it, Return of the King. Um, I what I when I listen to it now and thinking of where it came from, that ball of noise, is I was very disappointed that I really wasn't able to make the ball of noise of my dreams. That thing was just garbage, and yet I had put so much time and effort into it. But it just wasn't working. Even when I was making it, I knew it wasn't working, but I just kept going, hoping that it would just somehow I would find a way to work it out, and I really wouldn't at that time in my life. And I think Return of the King really is a song just about completely being lost and just looking for something to come along and just lead you out of there. It's a song about just looking for the answers and finding there are no answers to be found, and just hoping that there is someone with the answers is coming to find you. Oh, and so yeah, it's a song being lost, and it was appropriate for that ball of noise because that really was an experience of just having no idea what I was doing, being completely lost, and absolutely. So when it came to Wreathe, it was a very natural song to choose when I was looking for a bunch of acoustic stuff to play. I had never played it at any open mic, and in fact, I really wouldn't play it until Saul wanted to play it at our shows, and on I think a couple of occasions it ended the show, which might be why I don't have any recording of us play it, because tapes would always end before the shows ended. Our shows would always go long. I think one of our shows, I think, ended at like 3 a.m. in the morning. We had some DJs opening up for us, which was probably why we made money that night. And the they thought the whole night was DJs, and they didn't send a sound man over, so they didn't realize their mistake until late in the evening. And so after the DJs were done, we just kind of sat around for a couple of hours waiting for a sound guy to show up so we could play our show. And the people who showed up kind of just sat around with us, which was great. And I think everyone. Mike wasn't. Mike had joined up, but he wasn't quite ready to play, and he was there, and even Chad was there. And Scott did the drums for us that night, so he was performing with us. There's Saul, there's myself. So it wasn't the only time that everyone who had something to do with the band was in the same room together, but it was maybe one of two times that group of five people were present at the same time in the same occupying the same room. I'm getting off track. Return of the King. Return of the King, its chorus is partially in Spanish, but, or at least when I recorded it, I thought it was partially in Spanish. In the present day, I believe it is actually partially not in Spanish, but in nonsense. I was singing Spanish words, but I don't believe they actually mean what I thought they meant. And in actual fact, I don't think it actually means, I don't think they mean anything. I think what I thought I was singing at the time was Como Usted, which I thought meant either are you here or like you're here, like as if you were here. Um, And but I actually think the words I use don't actually mean that, and I'm not even sure they mean anything that makes any sense under any premise. So the song kind of ends with me reciting Spanish nonsense. uh, oh well. It sounded good. It sounded like it was really meant something. So I guess that's what's important, right? As long as it sounds like it means something, then it does. What I'm trying to do here is not working out. So if I seem lost, it's because I'm looking for something that isn't where it should be. Um, Now this maybe that'll do it. I do actually. I've dug out the CD of Wreathe. Now Wreathe was yeah, yeah, that's good. That's good. Do what I want you to do. Is this computer going to work? Yay! It worked. Um, we actually printed CDs for Wreathe. It wasn't the first, or it was the first time we did it. It wasn't the last time, but we wouldn't print very printing CDs, even at this time, was starting to become slip into a thing of the past. But we wanted to. We were eager. It felt like being a real band, and it made for a nice little keepsake for everyone involved. Um, it's a little dark. If you go to a place that prints, I guess you need to. The way they handle colors is a little different than what your computers do. So unless you have someone who knows what they're doing, you end up with a dark cover. And you'll notice it has the Gothic logo, and that's been changed for what you discover if you go to Spotify or something. If I ever decide to remix it again, I might go back to the original logo. I'm thinking this didn't look too bad. At a certain point, I wanted to emphasize the band being Rena, G.D.E, and this looks more like Renegade, which, but I think, so a few years ago, I started rebranding everything as Rena G.D.E, but I think this might have actually been easier, even though it's not for people to look for. But well, maybe I got that all wrong. Um, Now, as I mentioned before, we first recorded it with me playing on two of the songs, and then we had Mike replace the drums. So we actually there were kind of two versions of this. If you had the later version with Mike playing on it, then you had a CD that was printed in full color. Everything else was the same. I just printed up a bunch of full color CDs and opened them up and replaced it and sealed it back up. But this is the original black and white one. So if you had this, you sounded like shit. Sorry. And so yeah, when Mike came on, kind of did a little. As Chad like to say, did a little George Lucasing on it, and that's kind of what I don't like about CDs is they always once you print them, you're stuck with them. You don't. It's really difficult to change it after the fact, and I I kind of like doing the George Lucas thing. Although a few years ago, I went and decided to do a really more intense remix of this because I had just finished up Wreathe the second, which I would do like a decade later. And I thought, well, let's give this one a remix while I'm kind of doing these things. So I did go back to it, and with Return of the King, I actually really dug into that, and software has become really good at correcting tempos that are wobbly. And what I was really bad at, and probably still am, is when I'm just playing and Scott didn't know any of the songs. He never heard any of them before he played on them. He was just following me. And I'm playing, going by feel. There's no click track or anything to the ones I recorded with Scott. We just did it. And so I had the habit of throwing in extra beats or taking out beats that should be there, and just kind of doing a bit of a pause at the end of a phrase for drama, emphatic, and then back into it or whatever. So he was really just kind of following me and kind of wondering where I was going, and it was we really didn't do multiple takes because we did not know where we were going with it. Um, I didn't even know if this recording experiment with Scott would work out in any way, shape, or form. I just sort of, hey, come on over, let's try it out. We came on over, we tried it out. So we just went. I don't know if we went through the songs more than once. And I certainly don't think we went through Return of the King more than once, just once all the way through. And then the next day, Saul came by and we did our overdubs, and that was that. So this song was. I always felt it was diminished because it was very wobbly. Because of me, it was the tempo just ebbed and flowed. So I really was hoping that this software would tighten it up. However, when I did set the controls and push the button, I found that the drums are all tight now, and everything was in the right place, but it just didn't sound like Scott anymore. It didn't even sound like the same drum track. It was just very stiff, very ugly almost. So I really started digging in there to see what happened. Why? How did the sound get lost when it was straightened up? So I dug in there and I found a lot of Scott's technique has to do with. Well, there were two problems. I mean, two mistakes that the software made. Scott wasn't a problem. The software was. It One is he had a tendency to throw in a lot of. He didn't just use the drums as drums. He would tap on the rims, tap his sticks, or just tap the side of something as a rhythm. He was using everything was his palette, was his paint color scheme. So he was playing, but he would just kind of tap things or whatever, and he would tap lightly, heavy, whatever. So a lot of information just wasn't being factored in. Also, he had a terrific way of purposely being ever so slightly offbeat and then using it to create these conversations in his drumming. So, either it'd be the standard beat, then something would be, and then it would sort of create this conversation that would be resolved over the next several bars. So if you were to go in there and just kind of hammer all that into place in bar one, um, you lose that. There's no conversation. You just kind of have a lot of these weird stray notes that don't really do anything artistic once you put them in the lines, because they weren't meant to be in the lines to begin with. They were there was a flow there, and he's when Scott gets into a flow, he can be really marvelous at that. And I didn't even know that was going on until I started examining this drum track on a very micro level. So I did go in and straighten it out manually. It took me days on end. If had I known it would take that much work, I'm not sure I would have done it. But I'm glad I did, because I really, it really brought the song to life, in my opinion. It just having all that Scottism in there, and having it, and yet still having it in time, which I should have played it to begin with. Not a complicated song to play. Really, just I feel really brought it to life when I did that. I'm really happy I did that. Although when I was remixing Wreathe a few years ago, I actually went in not wanting to affect it too much. For me, it was very much a snapshot in time. It was it it really it really represented that period of things, and I didn't really want to affect the sound that much because I like it. It's kind of charming. It's not perfect, and trying to force it to become perfect, I feel would have might have broken it. I could go and re-record everything if I really wanted everything to be perfect. But what I like about Wreathe is just how imperfect it is, and I find that very charming. And I also like that Wreathe was really unplanned. There was it's the result of everyone being in a certain place at a certain moment of time, and this is what popped out. I talked earlier about spending years writing songs and thinking about things and just kind of going toward the right feeling, and this was kind of the opposite of that. It's just we're all here, let's do something, let's make something happen, and this was the something. That was the photograph we took of that moment, and for that it's very special for me, and I don't even though it has a lot of rough edges, it would be a shame to go in and fix it too much. I mean, there's the odd thing that if it doesn't really contribute to the expression, it's just noise or garbage or whatever. Sure. And that's what I was hoping to do a few years ago when I went back and remixed it. Just kind of make it just sonically more balanced and easier to listen to, but also communicate what it was. Wreathe. Nothing I set out to do, but I'm glad it happened. What I like about it too is, and this leads to where I'm going next, is after, if you were to look up this on Spotify, you would notice the next thing released in the Rena G.D.E history is Show Your Blood, and then A Time of Madness after. But actually, A Time of Madness was recorded right after Wreathe. And what I like about those two is that you can really hear Wreathe in A Time of Madness. You can really there's a very natural progression going from Wreathe to A Time of Madness. The songs just really feel like they're on the same road, just further down, a little more advanced, a little more technically put together, but they're very much the same. You can really hear the evolution of things from there. And I think that's why I'm going to talk about A Time of Madness next in this little series, is because it did immediately follow Wreathe, and so in my mind it was the next album, even though it didn't come out for many years later. And there were a few songs that didn't come out until after Show Your Blood. So I'm going to start kind of jumping back and forth in time a little bit. So I hope that remains interesting for you. Thank you for coming along for this journey through Wreathe and looking at this whole thing. Boy, if you had a microscope, you could read the lyrics on the back of this thing. Can just about make it out. I don't know if I could have even read it at the time I printed this up. Yeah, well, pages were expensive, and I only had two to dedicate to it. All right, well, I'm going to finish up my soda, and then we'll come back tomorrow, and we'll start in on a new era of the band, one of transition from folk band to from a wannabe folk band to a wannabe metal band, and succeeding at neither. Well, sometimes the journey is the success, isn't it? All right. Well, thanks for coming along. I'll see you tomorrow, and we'll start in on a time of madness. All right. Take care. Is this done?